Hi, everyone. My name is Emma, and I'm a graduate research assistant at the Center for Social Science Research. So if you're watching this video, there's a really good chance that you watched my first video, which is all about how to use Google Forms to create a survey. So if you're watching this video, that means maybe you've sent out a survey, but now what? So how do you go through and analyze the data that you have through your Google form now? So that's what this video is going to be about. So I'm going to use an example from one of our CSSR initiatives to kind of talk through the examples here. But let's go ahead and get started. So the example that I want to use to kind of center our conversation around today is the Youth Research Council survey. So Youth Research Council, like I said, is one of our initiatives here at CSSR, and it's a research collaborative and community-based experiential learning initiative. So this was launched in the fall of 2021, and the Youth Research Council is a partnership with CSSR and the Mason Early Identification Program. So I want to give a huge shout out here to the amazing Youth Research Council fellows who developed the survey that we're going to be looking at today, and also to Gianni Dazzo, who is a Mason alum and an assistant professor at the University of Georgia. And he also helps part-time with the YRC team. So he helped the YRC fellows with this analysis and survey. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen, and we can start talking about the survey a little bit. All right, so you'll see here that the YRC survey is a little bit more complex than the one that we created in the first example video. So as a reminder here, I've got this over on my monitor, but I'm going to pop back and forth for this conversation. So as you can see for the YRC survey, there's a pretty detailed list of kind of instructions or things for people to know before they take the survey. And then you can see that there's different sections throughout the survey. So the different sections, like we were saying in the last video, will put questions on different pages. So it's a little less visually intimidating for respondents to go through and see all of the questions on one page, and they're all kind of broken up here. So you can see there's some demographic questions. And then the survey really asks about students experiencing microaggressions in school. So asking students if they experience racial microaggressions, where they experience them, when they've experienced them, and who are the people who perpetrated these microaggressions. So it's such a great data set. And as you can see here in the response tab, we can go ahead and go over there. So there's 734 people who have taken the survey, which is just really great. But now that we're in the response tab and we have some data, you'll see this looks a lot different than it did in the first video because we have responses. So you can see here that we're accepting responses on the survey, and that's clicked on. But now that we're in here, we've got a summary tab, a question tab, and an individual tab. So let's go ahead and start with the summary tab. So one thing that is really nice about this summary tab is you start getting these different tabs as soon as you start getting respondents to your survey. So basically, as soon as one person takes your survey, you'll get kind of a summary of your data, and then this will keep updating automatically the more people take your survey. So this is kind of nice for a couple of reasons. So the first reason is that in survey data, one of the things we talk about a lot is your sample representative of the larger population that you're trying to survey? So basically thinking through, is the population that's taking your survey representative of the larger group that you're trying to learn more about? So a lot of times with survey data, we really do want our populations to be representative of that kind of larger demographic. So this isn't always the case, but one thing that's nice about being able to scroll through your summary data here is that you can see if your data is representative of your larger population. So say, for example, you're giving out a survey, but you notice that a lot more women than men are taking your survey. So you can try to send out your survey to more men if you need to, knowing that there's kind of an imbalance there, and vice versa too. So it's nice having these metrics as you go, so you can try to create a more representative sample, and so you can get a larger sample, so then you can run more statistical analyses on your data as well. But something too is not every sample is meant to be completely representative of a larger population. So that's kind of something to think in mind too, is is your data generalizable to kind of a larger population, or is it more generalizable to a local population as well? So that's kind of one note before we get into the summary tab a little bit more. But basically the summary tab is, as it kind of says, is a summary of all of your data. So you'll see here that it gives you a lot of different graphics based on all of your questions. So for example, this first one here, we can see that the first question was, do you consent to agree in the survey? And it gave us a little pie chart for that. So this is one thing to note with Google too, is that they'll give you these graphics for all of your questions, whether they're totally relevant or not. So even though we have this pie chart for the consent question, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to use this in analysis. So when we scroll down here, so this was a question that was a short answer question. And you can see that participants just typed in themselves what high school they went to. So you can scroll through here and see all the different high schools that folks said they attended for the survey. And then for what race do you consider yourself, you can see that we have a bar chart here, and you can get a pretty quick glance at all the different demographics. And one thing that I like a lot about Google is they'll tell you these specific numbers of, they'll give you a percentage, but then they'll also give you the number within the population too, which as a researcher, it's nice to have all that data at your fingertips. So another thing that's really nice too with the pie charts here is that you can kind of click over them and it'll tell you, okay, this orange section is junior, and there were 193 juniors that took the survey, which is 26.3% of the population. So it's really interactive, and it makes looking through your data a lot easier and a lot more accessible too, which we love. And then you can see too, if you click on or kind of hover over each of the different grade levels, it'll highlight on the pie chart which one you're looking at, which is great. So like I said, the summary tab is just kind of an overview of everything that is in kind of a summary of all of the different questions that you ask. So let's go ahead and look through now the question tab. So the question tab will look at every individual question and will show you the data that you got from it. So let's say question 17 here, for example, of my confidence or self-esteem at school has been negatively affected by racial or ethnic encounters. So you can see here that 394 people said never, 150 said rarely, 120 said sometimes, and then et cetera, et cetera. So this kind of breaks down the data question by question in a little bit more kind of detailed way. So you get kind of the individual number of responses for each question. And you can do this for all of the questions. So you can click on the drop-down level here, and you can click through the questions this way, or you can click through these arrows here and look through the questions that way. And then you have this View Options tab here, which shows you what the question looks like to the respondents. And then it shows you how people then responded. All right, and then the last tab we want to look at here is the individual tab. So the individual tab lets you look at every individual respondent's survey. So typically in social science research, you don't always need to see the individual respondent survey, but this is sometimes a really good practice that you can see patterns start to emerge when you look at people's data kind of on this more micro level. So you can look at the data here and just see how different people are responding, and you can see if there are kind of consistencies among the different respondents as well. You can also see too the date and time that people submitted it on, which is kind of interesting if you're trying to figure out, when people are taking the survey. And you can also go through too and delete responses if you want to as well. So this isn't something that we do a lot with social science research, but say, for example, that you have a respondent who only said, who looked at the survey and said, no, they didn't consent, and then that was it. So in that case, if you wanted, you could delete the data because it could be considered an outlier. But typically we like to keep all of that data and see what the larger patterns are. And sometimes those outliers can be interesting and important for your analysis too. All right, so once we've gone through all of these tabs here, we can start to think about, okay, so I kind of have a general idea of my data, but let's say you're scrolling through individual responses and you find it really interesting that in the Summaries tab, for example, so let's let this load here. So the survey is looking at racial microaggressions that happen in high schools. So one thing that's really interesting about this survey here is that when you look at the data here, over the past 3 years, how many of the experiences listed below have personally happened to you at school? So the percentages are maybe a little bit lower than expected. But if you think about this, it's because this data is a summary of everyone who's taken the survey. So this includes white students and minority students. But let's say, for example, we want to remove the white students' experiences and just look at minority students' experiences. And maybe that will increase the number of students that have experienced microaggressions. So this isn't something that we can do kind of in the Summaries tab, but Google does allow you to view this data in sheets. So when you click on that, it'll give you a big spreadsheet like this. So it's kind of intimidating, but bear with me. So basically the way that this works is every single question represents a different column here. And you can see, again, like you can see the timestamp when people are taking your survey. You can see if people agree to consent to the survey. And then every single question will follow in chronological order along those columns. And then every single respondent is a different row going down in the spreadsheet. So if you think of it this way, these are all of your individual respondents going up and down, and then going across are all of your different questions. And since there are 734 people who have taken the survey, this is a massive, massive spreadsheet filled with data. So one of the things that you can do here is you can sort your spreadsheet by what race people said they are. So if you want, you can pull out the students that are white, and then you can look and analyze and see what minority students are saying about if they experience microaggressions, where these happen, and who is perpetrating them. And once you do this, you can see that students of minority racial and ethnic backgrounds do experience microaggressions at much higher rates than the original Google Forms told us in the Summary tab. So this is something that we call disaggregating data. So you have to kind of pull out certain data points or control for certain data to see a more kind of nuanced analysis. And this is something that the spreadsheet and having the data laid out like this makes it really easy for you to do on your own. So this is something that I really like about Google Sheets, and it's something that's really helpful as a researcher to really get into your data. And then something you can do too is say you didn't have a lot of people take your survey. So sometimes if you ask people questions like, do you strongly agree? Do you agree? Do you neither agree nor disagree? Do you disagree or strongly disagree? So sometimes if you don't have enough people that take your survey, you can go ahead and combine some of those categories to make your data stronger. So you can combine the respondents that said, I agree and strongly disagree to create stronger data. And then you can combine the people that said, I disagree, or I strongly disagree. And this will make your data just a little bit more rich and a little bit more contextualized here too. So the nice thing too is you can also print this out. So you can have a hard copy of it if you're nervous about it living online. And the thing too that's nice about doing it this way, so this particular survey did not ask participants for email addresses, their name, or really any kind of information that we could tie back and figure out exactly who they are. So this data is pretty protected and we won't know who took the survey because of that. So that's something that's really nice here too. But that being said, that's pretty much how you can look at analyzing data with Google surveys. So if you're interested in more in some of the statistical analyses, we don't totally have time to cover that in this video, but check out the session for Community Engaged Research Workshop PowerPoint. And there's a lot more data in there too about how to tell what kinds of statistics and what kinds of analyses you can run on your data. So that will give you a little bit more information there. But just some kind of takeaways too, as you're going through your data, looking at the summary, and then as you start to disaggregate your data and say, okay, what are the nuances that that summary isn't telling me? Some things just to keep in mind are when you're reporting your results, try to think through what were the main results of your survey. So try to think through, what are participants telling us here and what is the data telling us? So try to think through the story that the data is telling you. So I tend to start with some of the more basic information of who are my participants, what did they have to say, and then why is that meaningful? And then it's always important to say that, did this analysis confirm what you thought it would say, or did it surprise you in any way and why? So kind of thinking through, like, is this answering a particular research question that I have, or is there something more here that I need to continue to dig into? And then finally, just kind of thinking through, does it support your research question? What kind of future research is needed in this area? And that's really a good kind of framework to start thinking about how to analyze statistical data and how to analyze survey data. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share here. But I hope you enjoyed this video and that it was helpful. And hopefully now you have some tools to start looking into using Google Forms and analyzing your data that way. So thanks for watching these videos. Bye.